16.5 Sex hormones in humans. Please go back to the objectives after you're done studying to make sure that you covered the lesson properly. There are two main terms that you need to differentiate between before we dig deeper into this lesson: adolescence and puberty. Adolescence is the time when a person approaches the sexual maturity, while puberty is the time when sexual maturity is reached. And puberty often happens in girls before boys, which means that girls reach puberty in an earlier age than boys. So what are the sex hormones? Mainly testosterone in males and estrogen in females. So adolescence in boys starts by the beginning of the secretion of testosterone by the testes. So what starts to happen? Secondary sexual characteristics. Like what? Like facial hair, pubic hair, which is hair appearing in the genitalia, broadening of shoulders, general muscle development, deepening of the voice, and growth of the sexual organs. Adolescence in girls, estrogen is secreted by the ovaries, of course. Secondary sexual characteristics start to appear. Like what? Growth of breasts, pubic hair too, widening of the hips, menstrual cycle, and the growth of the sexual organs as well. What's the menstrual cycle? It is the cycle that happens in the female's body every 28 days. But 28 days is a rough number, which means that it's the average. Why? Because in biology, we don't have specific numbers. Why? Because there are always individual differences. So, this happens by the release of an ovum from the follicle that develops inside the ovary. So inside the ovary, a follicle starts forming that will rupture to release an ovum into the oviduct. After this happens, the lining of the uterus starts to thicken in order to get ready to receive a baby. As you see here, now after the follicle starts to form, it bursts to release the ovum, and therefore the lining of the uterus starts thickening. And if this ovum is not fertilized, the body starts to get ready to release it outside. And this stage we call the menstruation, or the release of the thick and spongy layer that has formed inside of the uterus, the lining of the uterus that was getting ready to receive the zygote or the embryo, and since it did not receive an embryo, it starts being released outside of the body. And this is what we call menstruation. So the menstruation is the loss of the broken down uterus lining through the vagina of the female to be released outside of the body. So let's go through the steps of the menstrual cycle by days. The first phase of the menstrual cycle is the menstruation phase. This is when the blood starts to get released, or the blood and the spongy, thick lining of the uterus starts getting released outside of the body. So day one of the menstrual cycle is day one in the menstruation, or the releasing of the lining of the uterus. And menstruation usually in a healthy female occurs around 5 days, from day 1 to day 5 of the menstrual cycle. After this comes the follicular phase. It happens between day 6 and day 10, where a new follicle starts to form in order to release another ovum into the oviduct. Ovulation usually occurs at day 14 or the mid of the cycle. But since we said it's usually variable, so we will call the ovulation phase from day 12 till day almost 16. Starting day 17, this is the luteal phase. What happens? The walls of the uterus continue thickening until day 28, and since there is no embryo received or implanted, the menstruation will start again, and all of these thick spongy linings will be released outside of the body. Again, so ovulation, where the follicle bursts and the egg is released from the ovary, waiting for fertilization to take place in the oviduct. Now, after this, the follicle turns into a corpus luteum, and the lining of the uterus becomes more vascular, which means that it will contain more blood vessels, getting ready to receive the embryo. If this did not happen, menstruation will happen. What's menstruation? It is that the lining of the uterus will be released, broken down and released gradually through the vagina, and now this is day 1 till day 5 as we agreed before. And inside the ovary, a new follicle containing an egg will start to develop and the lining is repaired. So this is the menstrual cycle. During menstruation, the female loses the lining of the uterus, which results into the loss of a lot of blood, because we said that the lining of the uterus becomes vascular, which means that it will contain a lot of blood vessels or a lot of capillaries. So losing a lot of blood will cause pale skin and less oxygen to be delivered throughout the female's body, since she's losing a lot of blood. Therefore, less energy will be done by aerobic respiration or cellular respiration. So that's why the females are more tired and exhausted during the menstruation phase. Also, if fertilization occurred, here comes the function of the progesterone hormone. What does it do? It maintains the lining of the uterus in its place. So the progesterone hormone is responsible for the maintenance of the lining of the uterus. That's why it is a very important hormone during pregnancy. Let's answer some questions together. The calendar shows the menstrual cycle of a woman in September 2008. So here you see, this is the calendar of this woman. This is September month, and menstruation is marked in light gray, while ovulation is marked in dark gray. Why could fertilization not take place if sperms are released into the vagina on the 8th of September? So if sperms were released into the vagina on the 8th of September, we learned that sperms survive only for 3 to 4 days. So if this is day 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the ovum is not released yet, and it will not be released until the 15th, so there is no chance for fertilization to happen. So the answer is because the sperms can survive in the female reproductive system only for 3 to 4 days. So that's why the sperms will not be there when ovulation happens. Therefore, there will not be fertilization or joining of the nuclei of the two gamete cells. The graph shows changes in the thickening of the uterus lining of a woman. So this is the thickness of the lining, and these are the time in weeks. What happens each time at X? So what is the stage throughout the menstrual cycle that happens at the point X? Is it fertilization, implantation, menstruation, or ovulation? The answer is ovulation. Why? Because since the lining is decreased, this means that this is the menstruation phase. So after the menstruation phase by some time, here comes the ovulation. So if this is time in weeks, if this is the first week, so this is the second week. So during the second week, ovulation will always happen. The diagram shows a timeline of a woman's menstrual cycle which lasts for 28 days. On which days of the menstrual cycle is a woman most likely to become pregnant? So if this is the menstrual period, okay, from day 1 to day almost 5, and the ovulation will be at day 14, and the sperms can survive up till 48 hours to 4 days. So most probably the fertilization, or she will become pregnant between the days 13 to 16. The diagram shows a woman's menstrual cycle. On which day does ovulation occur, and on which day could fertilization occur? Ovulation will always happen in the middle of the cycle at almost day 14. And after ovulation comes fertilization. Fertilization will never be able to happen before ovulation. So Q will be ovulation and R will be fertilization. So the answer is C. A typical menstrual cycle consists of 28 days, which day 1 being the start of the menstruation. On which day is the lining of the uterus the thickest? So this is a tricky question, because most of you will think that the thickest time is when ovulation happens in the middle of the cycle, but actually the thickest time is before menstruation, because we said that after ovulation the uterus continues thickening until menstruation. So from those choices, the thickest day will be the 21st. Now let's answer a paper 3 question. Figure 6.1 represents an example of a human menstrual cycle. So here is the diagram. State the part of the menstrual cycle which is always the same length. Which part is always the same length? From ovulation to menstruation. The part before can vary according to the menstruation time. A woman's period starts on August 2nd and her next period starts on August 29th. Calculate the menstrual cycle for that month. So you will deduct both numbers from each other, so you get 27 days. Subtraction between the 29th and the 2nd. Human sperms can live for up to 48 hours in the female's reproductive system, and the human egg live for 24 hours after release. Ovulation occurred on the 16th of August. State the dates in August on which intercourse could result into fertilization taking place. I know that the lesson said that from 48 to 4 days, but since the question is telling you specifically 48 hours, so the question is discussing a specific case. So please follow the instructions or follow the givens given in the question. So the answer will be 14 to 17. Why? Because you will count 48 hours or 2 days before ovulation, which is day 14 and day 15, and then 2 days starting ovulation, which will be 16 and 17. During menstrual cycle, a female loses a lot of blood This can cause a woman to be anemic. Symptoms of anemia are lack of energy, pale color, and tiredness. Explain how these symptoms can be caused by blood loss during menstruation. So, this question is discussing the side effects of menstruation. During menstruation, the female loses blood. So this means that less blood that contains hemoglobin, and the function of hemoglobin is that it carries oxygen to all of the body cells. So this means that less oxygen in the female cells, therefore less aerobic respiration or cellular respiration, less energy, of course, and that's why the symptoms are tiredness and shortness of breath. Okay, when a woman becomes pregnant, the placenta and umbilical cord will form. State the names of 3 substances that must pass from the woman to the developing fetus through the placenta. You can choose any 3 from all of these options. Oxygen, of course, glucose, amino acids, glycerol, fatty acids. Of all of these options are needed by the baby for different reasons that you already know all of them from previous lessons. Thank you, and I hope this video helps you study.